Hello, my name is Wilson Smart, and this is my presentation on Dr. Sally Rice's article, Talent Ignored, Talent Diverted, the Cultural Context Underlying Giftedness in Females. My table of contents, so on slide 3, I'll go into the author's objective and description of study. Slide 4, why is this study necessary? Slide 5, 3 core categories of Rice's questionnaire. Slide 6, career choice. Slide 7, parental influence. Slide 8, effects of family on career and life satisfaction. Slide 9, discussion questions. And slide 10, references. Slide 3, author's objective and description of study. So Dr. Rice essentially wanted to know, she pulled 67 gifted females who ended up becoming teachers. She was wondering, are you okay with that? You were a gifted student. You could have been a rocket scientist. You could have been a doctor. Are you happy that you became a teacher? Obviously, there's nothing wrong with being a teacher. We're all teachers. But is that something you felt pressured into doing over environmental concerns? Or is that something that you actually wanted to do and you feel happy about it? That's essentially what she's asking in this study. And the answers are very interesting. Why is this study necessary? Ideas to consider before going any further. This should say, why is this study necessary from the perspective of an ignorant man? So when I was first reading this, was wondering, hey, maybe men might not be satisfied in their careers either. Why are we just asking gifted women? Is anybody satisfied in their career? But as I continued reading, it's really just a fundamentally different question, because at least in 1995, and probably still today, women were responsible for so much more around the house, especially with raising a kid, but also with cleaning and just doing household chores, that them being able to do a full-time job was an entirely different question than their husbands doing a full-time job. And so the satisfaction that they might derive from that job is going to be a kind of a different question. So something that really blew my mind when I was reading this was that out of the 67 people who were polled, the average the most common response for how much free time do you have was about half an hour for these women who are mothers as well. So they had half an hour of free time a day, and they were doing about 70% of the household chores on average, with only about 31% of the sample doing less than 75% of the work. So when you consider that that was a given, that was something that they were expected to do or are expected to do, the question about their career and how satisfying it is or is not is a much different question than asking a man that same question. So there are 3 core categories of the questionnaire. There's career choice. So Dr. Rice is wondering, did gender play a factor into which career these gifted women chose? Remember, these were gifted students. They had ideas about being probably lawyers, doctors. Why did you become a teacher? Is it because you're a woman? Second, parental encouragement. Did parental encouragement or lack thereof have an effect on these respondents' careers? And finally, effects of family on career and life satisfaction. So that's what I was getting at on slide 3. But to what degree was the subject compromising her career or personal satisfaction for the sake of her family? So these 3 different core categories all have a huge effect on how these women feel about their careers, how they chose their careers, and maybe how satisfied they feel about it. Slide 5, career choice. Do these gifted women regret their career choice to be teachers? So 60% of the respondents believe they made the right career choice, and 36 respondents were unsure. And only 4% believe they made the wrong choice. So it seems like most of the teachers don't regret it necessarily, but there were 2 emergent themes that came out that were very interesting. One, many females in traditional careers were angry about the limited range of careers they believed were available to them due to the social structure of the world. So while they don't necessarily regret being teachers, They want to acknowledge that they did not feel that they had the same amount of opportunities available to them that other people did because of sort of the cultural context surrounded them as future mothers and future wives. Secondly, um, prestige and financial reward were rarely mentioned as a reason for career choice by the sample as a whole, and never mentioned as one of the four most important criteria of any of the respondents. That to me is really interesting. It's unclear if it's because women think that they don't that they're not entitled to something like prestige and financial reward, or if that's just not something that interests them and they would rather do something that is more interpersonal or something that's more spiritually rewarding. Or maybe there's a different reason, but it's very interesting that that was not really mentioned as something that was important. Slide 6, parental influence. Did respondents' parents encourage educational and career aspirations? So 80% of the respondents indicated they received conditional parental encouragement. So this was a really interesting and kind of sad part of the article. Parents were really happy to encourage their children to get their education and be the best student they could be. But when it came to pursuing a career, they often encouraged them to only pursue careers that enable them to devote themselves to family in a more traditional female role, such as a social worker, a nurse, a secretary, etc. And they believed that because they thought that would make it easier for them to be mothers and wives. And as we saw, it's very difficult to be working full time and be a mother and wife, so that's understandable. But it's also, in my opinion, entirely unfair to the gifted females who did not get the same encouragement as their male counterparts. Next, effects of family on career and life satisfaction. Are you satisfied with the balance between your life, family, and career? So, 47% of the women claim to be satisfied with their current life, although half of these women added a but to their response. 10% indicated they were not at all satisfied with their lives, and 43% were unsure. So, this is the last part of the article, and this is sort of what tied it all together. And there was a lot of different answers from the women on how they felt about their careers and how sometimes they felt good, and then other times they felt like they weren't really they weren't maximizing anything. They were feeling guilty about not being a good enough mother because they were working too much, and then they were also feeling guilty about not being able to achieve as much as they wanted to in their career because of how much they were working at home. So, while again, it seems like many of the women were unsure whether they were particularly satisfied. There was just a lot of diversity of answers here, and no real conclusion that is particularly or resolution that's particularly sad. Finally, three discussion questions, but you only have to answer one. One, what programs and strategies, if any, can be implemented in our schools to ameliorate the societal effects identified by this and other research? Two, do you believe that the culture surrounding women in the workplace has seen significant improvement since the study was conducted in 1995? Why or why not? And number three, at the beginning of the article, Rice posits the following. A conflict may exist for gifted females because of the difference in value systems between men and women, including the ethical sensitivities of women regarding the importance of interpersonal relationships and connectedness. Do you believe in this potential difference in value systems can exist? Explain your answer. So essentially, that question is saying, or it's implying that there's actually women just feel differently, have a different value system than men, and they care a little bit more about interpersonal relationships and connectedness. And so I could see on the one hand, maybe that's true. Maybe there is a fundamental difference between men and women. But at the same time, we saw that there are cultural differences that are also forcing women into different roles than men. So do you think it is something that is inherent to the nature of men and women? Or do you think that it is more of a cultural thing that has caused women to fall back into this sort of and into that sort of way of existing? And finally, here are my references. All right, thanks, guys.